Randy Montgomery is a first Gulf War veteran. He had a truly yucky experience, and it was in Iraq. It gave him severe PTSD. PTSD is, he'll explain, is a very disabling but invisible disorder. It's far more common as a disorder or a wound of war than any of the physical wounds, and yet it's not that recognized, and relatively few people with it get the treatment that they deserve. So Randy had a long and difficult period of being, how would you say it, sort of badass, and but then he found a good woman, and in jail I think you were training support dogs, right?
Service dogs.
Service dogs, and so you came across Scrappy and trained him, and you have now a really nice life. You work as a farmer out near Chester Hill. Anyway, I'll let him say the things that need to be said, and help me welcome Randy Montgomery.
A lot of young people, I didn't see the options that I see now were available to me, so I joined the military. Pretty traditional thing to do. And against all advice, I joined the Army, joined the infantry. Under the delayed entry program, you sign up, and then at some period of time before you leave, I kind of scheduled it out so I could graduate, enjoy my summer, all these kid things. And I remember when I signed up, my grandmother was really distraught. She kept saying, "What if there's a war?" And I thought, I said, who could we go to war with? That's the silliest thing. I mean, there's nothing going on.
We always have war.
Yeah, well, yes, in between the time I signed up and I left for basic training, of course, there was a war. So I went to basic training, Fort Benning, Georgia. I'll try and get through this pretty quickly. And so the air assault in Iraq had started then, and so, that was a big thing, being in basic training. And I got stationed at Fort Riley, Kansas with the Big Red 1, Charlie Company 216, real big traditional Army unit. And when I got there, they had already deployed, because the Big Red 1 kind of always deploys. And so I was in an overflow thing, and they ended up sending us over there, but it was kind of hectic. It was hard to get my footing. And I remember my first experience there, they chartered planes, and the plane landed in the middle of the desert. They dumped us all out, and then the plane took off, I suppose for security reasons. And there was nothing there but a tin shed and a big pole with a light on it and a chemical alarm that went off all night. The whole time we were there, the alarms went off so much they told us just quit using them because they must be broken. So anyway, but we didn't know that then yet. We weren't used to it. Everybody knows the history of it. There was a massive air assault and then a very brief and furious ground assault, and Saddam Hussein surrendered. My part in it, being infantry, was, of course, the ground assault. I won't really talk about that in detail. It's just, to sum it up, pretty much I was coincidentally in the same company as Timothy McVeigh. So if you've ever read about him, that would give you an idea of kind of what it was like, how it influenced people. I just looked up the number to be correct, actually, in the parking lot. Like, we had a total, the entire war, of, I think, about 300 casualties, and half of them were self-inflicted. And despite the fact that they all surrendered, and we really overpowered them, we have an awesome military. We spend a lot of money on it, and we just rolled them over. But somehow, even though they all surrendered, we just rolled them over. They had 10,000 casualties just in the ground assault, and that would be because storming. Norman was in charge. He was a great general from my point of view, but his attitude was he was a young officer in Vietnam, and he didn't like the politics of the whole thing. So he told us, he just kind of turned us loose, and we sat there through this whole air assault, and, you know, we went through and we pretty much shot everything, from the camels to the lizards to the Iraqis. And I read often that PTSD is a result of continued exposure to the stress and the trauma, and I guess I didn't have that. It was just a very, very intense few days, and it affected me. You know, we drove down the so-called highway of death when it was still smoking. So anyway, fast forward from that. That all happens. I go through that whole thing, and I come home, and I did something that I saw in a movie, a big movie that was out a couple years ago, and I didn't realize I'd done it until I watched the movie. I called my mom when I got home, and she was like, "Where are you at?" Because sometimes we didn't have cell phones then. Sometimes we would get trucked to a place with satellite dishes and call home. So she said, "Well, where are you at?" And I said, "Oh, I'm at a payphone outside a bar in Junction City, Kansas." She's like, "Well, how long have you been home?" I was like, like 2 or 3 days, you know. And I did it unthinkingly. I wasn't dodging calling my mother. It's unexplainable. It reminds me of the scene in that movie where he calls his wife from the bar, and she's like, "Where are you at?" And I think a lot of people watching that would think, you know, what kind of jerk is he? But I don't think he you know, I didn't mean to do it. And some incidents, that incident, and I've got a couple more that will point out, I guess, how things were going at that time. I went to the mall, and I was used to being out in the desert with a sparse population, and everybody was clearly labeled. You were wearing our uniform or you weren't. We were all going the same direction. And I went to the mall, and all these different people, all these noises, and I melted down in the middle of the mall, kind of. I just froze, and I was standing there, and I didn't know what to do. And a Vietnam veteran, I didn't know at the time, a shoe salesman come out and said, "I'll look at some shoes," and I'm like, "No, not really." He said, "Well, you need to come in and sit down." He said, "I've seen guys look like that. You need to come in here and sit down." And I did, and I went in and talked to him, and you know, got my bearings and left. And I didn't give that much attention, really. And I went home, and I had my girlfriend, my high school sweetheart, and I really wanted to see her. You know, I've been gone a while, my high school sweetheart, and we go on a date, and about halfway through the date, she asked me to take her home. So I take her home, and I still understand that things aren't going well. And she says, "You know, I don't think I ever want to see you again." I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" She said, her dad was a veteran, Vietnam era veteran. She said, "My dad told me you'd be different, but I didn't believe him." She said, "But you're different, and I don't want you to come back." And I thought, I dismissed that. That's the main problem with PTSD for me. A lot of people that suffer PTSD are military and usually in combat units, or also, you know, firefighters, police officers. And it's a really macho environment. You don't show any pain. You don't complain. I hear it's better now, but back then, you know, you couldn't say you wanted to go see the chaplain or the doctor. That's the end of your career. It's over. So I just dismissed everything. And I was one of those people, you know, raised in Southeast Ohio, Appalachia. I kind of had the idea that mental health in general, mental health issues, mental illness, that's a joke. PTSD, who really has that? That's not even real. I had this idea that if I had PTSD, then I'd be having flashbacks and creeping through the trees like the enemy was there, you know. A movie idea of what it may be. So I dismissed it, and I ignored it. And being in the infantry, a combat unit, everybody ignored it. I'm sure I'm not the only one. The things that I know, I'm not the only one that things didn't go well for. Some people seem to just survive it and not have any troubles. I've thought about that long and hard. I really don't know why. Except maybe it seems like some people that really struggle with it were on the edge to start with. You know, those guys that were in the Army to get college money and had nice stable homes and good things going for them, it doesn't seem like they suffered from it as much. They, you know, were able to absorb it. Those of us that grew up maybe in, you know, redneck Appalachia or broken homes and things like that, that didn't seem to take it so well. That's just my personal theory. And the denial in the military at that time was to the point where I got transferred to another unit in Germany after the war was over. That's what, you know, you transfer. And I can remember one incident where I woke up, when you go to the field in Germany, it's really nice. They have barracks out there for training. And I woke up the whole barracks screaming in my sleep because I had a lot of nightmares. And somebody just woke me up, and then everybody went back to sleep like nothing happened. You know, that was the environment. Said I hear it's different now. I don't know. In the early 90s, it wasn't very good. It wasn't acknowledged that it existed. And I go to the VA now, and I think the VA still is determined that PTSD doesn't exist, really. I might talk about that later. I think the VA's been trying to kill me, actually. Anyway, besides my mental state, you know, and thinking that it would be shameful to admit any weakness and really not admitting it to myself. I also had a general decline in health. I think a lot of it was the stress, and a lot of it I still don't know what it is. I left for Iraq the perfect picture of health, and I came back having meltdowns in the mall and with bad digestion and bad skin and chronic pain and everything else. And looking back, if there was a checklist of things that guys do, I did them. If you have PTSD and you're in the military, you do these things. And being in support groups and looking at it, I realized I did them all. I was in a constant state of fight or flight, adrenaline, and I couldn't get out of it. I never relaxed. I still don't relax. I think that might be part of the reason my back hurts a lot. You know, like my wife, where I went to get a massage before, somebody gifted me, and they said, "Why don't you relax?" And I'm like, "I am relaxed." I said, "No, you're not." Feels like it to me, but I'm always, my shoulders, my neck are never relaxed. I was very reactive. There's a stimulus, I react, like almost, you know, like, it's like a switch was flipped and I could not unflip it. I could not unflip it. Some people unflipped it, I did not. I started doing things like I got the fastest production motorcycle made that year. Dated strippers, gotten a lot of fights, gotten a lot of trouble. Had a fondness for firearms. I still struggle with this part. I was very vigilant. I don't miss anything, anything at all. A good example of that would be our neighbors have children, and at one time they had a little play school, plastic, not even realistic, only about this high basketball hoop with a sand base, you know, in the backyard. And I wanted to kill that thing for about a month because every time I walked around the house, I saw it out of the corner of my eye, and I knew it didn't belong there, sticking up there. And finally, just by chance, I was on the verge of going and asking him to move it, but I didn't want to because it was kind of embarrassing. It went away. I don't know what he did with it, but. And the thing about, I guess, all mental illness, but for me, PTSD, that denial thing, it really didn't work out very well. Instead of, I thought it was one of those things, just give it time and it'll go away. There's nothing drinking a couple beers won't cure. And it just got worse. It festered like a sore. I started to drink a lot, like all the time. I started to do drugs. I had like a Viking mentality. Like with my motorcycle, I could make it the 1,100 miles to my parents' house in 11 hours, counting gas, food, sometimes a nap, because I really wanted to die, but I didn't want to kill myself. I didn't think that would be quite dignified, so I put myself in positions. And I don't know how I lived, really. I really don't. I know a lot of guys haven't. And then of all things, this is a horrible thing to admit or talk about, this might be one of the worst parts of this, I started to commit robberies because this is a horrible thing, but it was the one time I felt the most alive. It's weird. When they asked me why I did it, because of course I got caught, I ended up spending 17 of the next 21 years of my life in prison for drug and crimes and violent crimes, and whenever they'd ask me why I did it, I would be like a little kid. I'd say, I don't know, I shouldn't have done it, I'm really sorry. And the truth was, it was just the only time the high-risk situations is the only time I ever felt alive. At all. But that was a big problem with coming back. Everything was dead, like a flat can of pop that had been sitting out for a week. I had no feeling about anything. I didn't know how to react. Like sometimes if something really joyous or really sad happened, I didn't really know how to react, and I would look at the people around me to see what they were doing, to see what I was supposed to be doing, because I couldn't feel anything. But through all that, I stayed in denial that I ever had a problem, even though my health is continually getting worse, and the vigilance and the reactiveness and the adrenaline and all of it is continually getting worse. It's a self-feeding cycle, really. You do or see or witness or take part in some things that give you PTSD. So then it led me to do other things, which then again made me feel, it's a cycle. Things went bad over there, so the whole motorcycle and the fast life thing, and then that didn't go really well, so then the whole robbery thing, and then prison is no place for a person with PTSD. It's no place for a human being in general, but it's really no place for a person with PTSD. All the noises and people and banging and clanging and yelling, and you're confined. And with PTSD, a big problem I have is wanting to have like control. Like I know all the exits from this building, and I've only been here twice. And you had no control, and it just got worse that entire time. And as a result, I don't know if it's part of my overall health decline or because my mental state, my digestion's terrible still. Chronic pain, I never relax, I disconnect. I think that's one of the worst things. That's my wife's least favorite thing. I don't feel anything, even though I know I should. I'm not even really aware of what's going on around me sometimes. It's better now. I'll get to it being better though. And the paranoia, the memory loss, I figured out through going to therapy and going to see a doctor the last few years that there's whole chunks of my life gone. And it wasn't from drinking. It wasn't because I consciously wanted to forget. I don't know how I forgot them. Significant things like relationships, years, I don't know where they went. And I think it's because my mind had enough, and it just started boxing off parts. And it doesn't discriminate. It takes the good with the bad. There's no controlling it, what it takes. In the state of mind I stayed in for those, from the time I came back until I was about 38, it was a really useful state of mind to be in Iraq. It's the way I probably should have felt. But it's not useful at all when you're at home. I'm glad we won. I'm glad it wasn't in the United States. I'm glad we did not suffer all those casualties here. But I don't know if victory is really victory because we all brought it home. One prison, the last prison I was in, there were 8 dorms. And one of them, because they started a special program there, God bless them, was completely full of veterans. That's a lot of veterans in jail. The national numbers are something like 8%. I know in Ohio it can be. Maybe I was in the right spot at the right time, but it was a lot higher than 8%. And I don't know how I'm not one of those guys that killed themselves. Said I thought for a while, it seems like the VA tries to kill us so that we won't ever come back for treatment. First time I went to the VA and talked to a therapist, she said, well, I want to know what is really bothering you. You tell me what the problem is. And I told her. And in more detail what I told you about being in Iraq. And she looked honestly horrified and said, well, I don't think you probably really want to talk about that, do you? Let's talk about something else. I was like, it's like you've been shot and you go to the hospital and they shoot you again. I don't want to talk all bad about the VA. I've met some really awesome doctors and people there, but overall it hasn't been good for me at all. So how did I snap out of it? It got so bad that I couldn't function and nobody wanted to be around me, except barely my wife and my dog and my cat. That was about it. I ended up in jail again, and I decided I'd probably just had about enough. So I started off with, I decided I had a drinking problem, so I quit drinking and doing all the drugs that went with it and going to a 12-step program. And that was a miracle in my life. It really helped me a lot. But after a couple years of that, I kind of took an inventory and I looked around and I was like, you're really sober, your brain function seems to be back, and you're still waking up whole dorms full of men screaming in the middle of the night. Something's not working out. And so I went to a doctor. Prison doctors aren't a really good place to go, and they dismissed me. I had a burst of inspiration and wrote a letter and complained to this wonderful woman that works at the VA. A couple days later, they called me back in and gave me a therapist then, and it worked out really well. I got lucky. She's from a military family. She was an alcoholic, and she understood. And I started talking to her, and it was really rough to talk to her because you know, doctors like to give you that piece of paper that says what are your interests, your hobbies, you know, a little bit about yourself, and I couldn't fill it out. I had no idea. I had everything on it would have been a lie because I had no interest, I had no hobbies, I had no feelings, I had no strengths, and I had no weaknesses. I had nothing to put on this paper. So it was really hard starting to talk to somebody because I didn't know how I felt or what I thought, period. I never stopped to think about it. I just reacted to everything and kept going. And then they started a veterans program. They wanted to train service dogs for veterans, and I trained dogs before privately, and I volunteered for that, and that really helped, you know, giving back and being in contact with other veterans that had been diagnosed with PTSD and wanted service dogs. I started to see how that thing was working, and a guy started coming in from the vet center in Wheeling to have a group for combat soldiers with PTSD, a support group. And of course I went because I'm really desperate at this point. You know, I've been sober now for 2 years, and like I said, I'm still nothing's really working out. And he started saying, you know, at this point I'm still really in doubt whether there's anything wrong with me. I think I'm just stupid, basically, or crazy, like crazy that's unfixable, and that there's something special about my situation. He starts asking questions like, well, what were the names of the guys you were there with? I'm like, I don't know. He's like, what'd they look like? Can you picture them? I'm like, well, of course. No, I can't. He's like, when were you there? I'm in the fall. I said, no, ground assault was in the spring. I was still in basic training in the fall once I pinned down the dates. I was like, man, how does he know these things about me? And he, you know, about the adrenaline and the guilt and the hypervigilance, and he started to explain it all in a way I could understand because he was another soldier, a veteran. And he got out of the Army and had his problems and went to college and, you know, became a counselor. And it was life-changing talking to him. Like, there's really something wrong with me, and it's something that maybe I can do something about. I remember I told a couple people, my mother, my wife, at that time, I said, you know, I think I talked to this guy, and I think I might have PTSD, and they both kind of snickered at me like, you really didn't know that. Like, my mom said, I've known that ever since the day you come to our house. And she said it at the time. I guess if your girlfriend leaves you and your mother tells you there's something wrong with you, it's a lesson in that. You should listen. I did, and I'm like, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't understand what it's like, you know, being a man, being a soldier, all this. I'm all of 18 and I know everything. And you know, my mom did try and tell me that when I was 18. She's like, there's something wrong with you. And I'm kind of scared of you. Like, I'm fine, you know. Until 20 years later of constantly hiding it from myself, it progressed to the point where I was scared of me. I didn't trust myself. I didn't ever know what I would do. I had no real control over my actions anymore. I see guys now at the VA hospital and they're young. They just come back from Iraq or Afghanistan and they look like trapped animals in there. And sometimes we'll be waiting, and I've got more patience now. I'm older, been in treatment. I go see a psychiatrist every other week now. It was every week for a while. So I deal with it. They'll just get up and walk out and not come back. That's the end of the appointment. They'll call their name and they're gone, long gone. Over the smallest of things. They weren't even there for PTSD or a heart attack or anything. And it hurts me really. And I think that what they saw in me, did I look like a wild animal trapped in a room like these guys do? I mean, they look terrible. You know, finally opening up to somebody helped, and I wish I'd done it a long time ago and not been in denial. And I always thought it was an excuse, a lie, a myth. And now I realize, okay, I have PTSD. It's not, it's real, and it's not an excuse, and it's not really exactly a handicap or anything. It's just something that is. It exists, and I need to do something about it. That's all there is to it. So they used to use my behavior and my circumstances as an excuse of validation. Like, you don't know what I've been through. You don't know what I've done. You know, you don't know what I've seen. Oh, yeah. But now I realize that's not what it is. It's just a condition that I need to be aware of. And after getting out of denial, the thing that helps me most now, and the best thing I get out of going to see that doctor every 2 weeks is I stay aware. Because it used to be I'd have these bad episodes and I didn't understand where or why they came from. I just knew they came. And I would somehow fight through it, or not always successfully, often unsuccessfully. And then I'd forget about it. Those were some of the things I blocked out of my mind. And then the next time it would happen, I would start over. I wouldn't have any of that memory, none of those coping skills, and now I'm aware that I need to do things if I start feeling disconnected, more hyper-vigilant than normal, because I don't know if that'll quite ever go away. I know I need to relax. I know I'm under stress. I know I need to talk to somebody. I know I need to get out to my farm with my dog. Sometimes people say, you know, oh, I feel sorry for you. You're out there all day by yourself and it's hot and it's just you and the dog. And I'm like, oh, no, don't worry about me. That's exactly where I want to be. I've somewhat build a life for myself that I can cope with. I'm not ever going to be able to work as a security guard or a cashier at the mall, for example. It's just not going to work out. I'm going to snap and do something really embarrassing. But I can farm and go to the produce auction with all the old farmers. And Rural Action from Athens, actually, OU, they're there all the time. And it's a real safe, comfortable, welcoming family environment. And I can cope that way. I have my service dog. I think this is one of the reasons Tom talked to me. Maybe the main reason, because I had a dog with me.
The only reason.
Really, yeah. That helps
I always
immensely.
ask people, they have a service dog, what's he for?
I would recommend it to anybody. Obviously, you probably need to like dogs. That helps me. I like dogs, and I can take him with me anywhere legally. So that's nice. And he knows when I'm upset. That's why he wasn't listening too well, because I was thinking about what I was going to have to say, and he knew. Sometimes when he gets like that, I know. Like, I didn't know until he's acting like that. Like, sometimes I get mad at him, like, why is he acting like that? My wife will say, well, because you're acting like that. You know, I'll be like, oh. And he really helps me in public. He takes the attention off of me. And even if people come up to me and talk to me, they talk about the dog. And if I start to feel like I'm going to lose it, I can hide somewhere, like by the furniture in the store, or just walk out and go outside, and people think, oh, it's the dog is upset. The dog needs to go to the bathroom. No, not really. This dog's kind of bulletproof. He'll sit through anything. He doesn't need to go to the bathroom for 12 hours after the last time he went. I'm using him for an excuse, you know. And, it helps, because then I don't feel ashamed, or like everybody's looking at me like, what's wrong with that guy? Why is he acting like that? Why is he standing over there in the corner? They think, oh, the dog is upset. It helps me interact with people better, because that's a symptom for me. I didn't interact with people very well. I liked everything to be clear cut. Either you were with me or you were not. And this room, if I'm looking at life that way, how can I really relate to any of you? You know, it's awful. So if anybody has been through some rough stuff, I think PTSD is probably vastly underdiagnosed. I don't think it's just a military thing. I think anybody that's been through some horrible trauma, people I've come into contact through, you know, support groups and 12-step meetings, they definitely have PTSD, and if they weren't in the military and they weren't police officers, you know, people suffer abuse, and it'd be nice if everybody would try and find treatment somewhere and not wait 20 years like I did. Because I grew up a certain way, country way, in southeast Ohio, but I was by far not the most trouble getting in kid around. I did run around a lot. I was one of those kids that had a car when he was 15 and drinking beer, but I didn't get in the most trouble. I got good grades. I didn't get kicked out of school. But after I deployed, I came back a different person. And if at that time, I think, if I'd have just been aware of it, or the Army had been like, you know, we want to help these guys out, maybe you can't just bring them back and turn them loose. Because said it happened over there, but a lot of us brought it back with us. We ruined our families. I know a lot of guys that overdosed, guys committed suicide, guys in prison. They throw around the number of 22 suicides a day. I thought that was probably a myth to get publicity, and then I looked it up, and a lot of credible sources say that may be a low estimate. And that doesn't include, like I said, everybody that's overdosed or went to prison. Maybe wish they were dead. I think a lot of that probably could be avoided. I really think it could. I mean, war is war, and our government does what it does. I guess that's not part of what I'm talking about. But I realize now I didn't have to go through all that. I don't know if I'd take any of it back, because I'm pretty happy with who I am now. Some things you only learn the hard way, and I'm the kind of person that likes to burn himself on the stove 3 or 4 times before it gets through his head. I've never been good at giving up, but that's been good since I started trying to get treatment. Because not all treatment's good treatment. I think the VA's tried to kill me. I went and saw doctors in jail, which isn't the best bet, and I've come to find out that certain places you go, they prefer certain diagnoses. They prefer certain medications. And it took a couple go-rounds with the doctors before I found a place where I met Tom, and the diagnosis actually made sense, and the medication they prescribed actually helped. Because up until then, they give me medication, and I just didn't feel right when I took it, and whether I took it or didn't take it, I didn't behave or feel any differently, any better. Anything they ever wanted to talk about never helped. So sadly, I think once a person does decide they need treatment, sometimes you really got to fight for it a little bit. You really got to want it. You know, there's history books full of bad doctors and bad medications and mistakes, and doctors aren't perfect. And I've been to places where the doctors really weren't even qualified to treat or diagnose PTSD. So one time I was bipolar and a couple other different things, and medicated for these things, and it wasn't helping, you know. So it's a struggle. It's an ongoing struggle, but the struggle is worth it to get a life back and have a dog and be able to come to the library and speak to people. To be with my wife for 10 years now. Not married the whole time, but married, more or less. We were married about the 3rd time we laid eyes on each other. And she knew me about half our relationship. I wasn't getting treatment. And I think was it 6 months into our relationship, she woke me up hitting me because I was sitting hard, choking her in my sleep, because the nightmares were terrible. Especially that I always have one nightmare that I haven't had now for a year or so of something pursuing me. and I'm fighting it, and I can't hit it, I can't shoot it, I can't kick it, and I can't outrun it. And the denial, I had that same dream from the time I was 18 till now, and didn't even know it repeated until 4 or 5 years ago. And it's the one that always woke people up screaming, or I choke my wife, or somebody go to wake me up, and I jump out of bed. And I haven't had it for a year now, and I think that's because of support groups and talking to a doctor and being aware. And to be the second or third time I've mentioned it, and it's scared me the first couple times, so I thought, now I'm going to have it. But I'm getting kind of confident now. I don't think I'm going to have it just because I told you all about it. I think the chances of me having it might have just drastically went down, to tell you the truth. I understand now that dreams, my guilt, my fear. But that dream is gone, and now there's a new dream. And it's thanks to treatment. I wish I'd known about NAMI sooner. Might have helped.
I wish we'd known you.
Yeah. So I guess with that I close. I talked a little bit longer than I meant to, but
Let's have
that's
some
all I got.
questions.
You said you have a lot of the tension and it's having an effect on your health. Have you read about the relationship between PTSD and the stress in the brain and then the physical effects it has on the body?
Yes.
Yeah.
I haven't pinned it down. I'm really not sure how connected the two things. I know they're connected, but sometimes they act independently too, so I don't know. Sometimes I'm in a very good state of mind and still pretty tense, and sometimes I can be pretty upset and feel really good. But generally they do go hand in hand. I'm not relaxed now, and I really should be. I mean, inappropriate not to be in a way, but I could jump up and run out that door right now.
I think we're all with you in here.
I just want to say thank you for sharing. I know I would be stressed up just being in front of a group. That's a big issue for me, and it's a big deal to share.
I found out the hard way, I thought, because I've shared quite a bit in other 12-step groups, and I thought it would be the same. And I did an interview, and I found out it wasn't the same at all. This is something I don't talk about there in other types of groups. I might mention it, but that's an issue for an entirely different setting. This is only the second time I've ever talked about it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That was a radio interview?
Yeah, that was the first time.
Yeah.
I hit a bad stretch after that. I think it's your fault.
Well, it's hard to open yourself up.
It is, and I recognize now, and I have a doctor I can talk to about it, that it was healthy, even though it really hurt. It's kind of like physical therapy. It really hurt, but I'm glad I did it. And I feel better now than I did before I did it. The sharing's good because, like I said, it's my environment where I got PTSD. It's a really macho environment. You don't share. Not any weakness. You share stories. The more outrageous, the better. Not anything that involves you having a weakness, especially mental or emotional. Then we'll be men the way I was raised. I joined the Army, and it just gets worse from then on out. It's all a total load of crap now that I look back on it, to tell you the truth.
So you haven't had any good experiences with the VA?
I've had some. I've had some extraordinarily good experiences, but I'd say they're isolated. I know one experience I should give him credit for when I was not in a good state of mind. I was in absolute denial. I used to go for my physical every 6 months, and at the very end, the doctor would always, he was an older, real nice, stereotypical in a movie, older little doctor, and he would look at me and say, "Hey, before you go, do you think you have a drinking problem?" I'd say, "No." And I might have been drunk when I was saying it. And he would say, "Do you think you might have PTSD?" And I'd be like, That's not even real. No, I don't have PTSD. He'd be like, I think he understood that I really wasn't open to conversation. He'd always say, well, okay, have a nice day. I just wanted to ask. You know? He was trying to tell me something, but. So I have had good experiences. Very good foot surgery, for example. But in general, no, not at all. And through Dogs for Warriors, meeting a lot of guys with disabilities from the military, I come to find out that most of them got their treatment and their diagnosis and everything from the private sector, none of them from the VA. Very rare. Then the guys that are happy with the VA are usually the guys that have fought the long, bitter fight and won, and now the VA's kind of forced to treat them because they're rated a high enough level of disability they can't even walk, basically. And I hate to sound like Oliver Stone, but it really does seem like they really want us to die. I just no other explanation. I wanted to die when I left there many times. If it wasn't for my wife and the doctor and other 12-step meetings I've been of. I really sympathize with the guy that set himself on fire in a parking lot, let's put it that way. Was that a couple years ago? I understand why he did it.
We had another vet who had PTSD, and he lectured here, and he talked on our radio program and talked to the police training. He had been in both Iran and Iraq and Afghanistan. And he ended up being sort of the leader of about 40 of them. He'd been 3 years in that. And last I heard from him, 4 or 5 years ago, he had tried to keep track of his buddies that were in that group. And a bunch of them had committed suicide, and others had committed capital murder. Probably 6 or 7 out of that group, as of that time, had those 2 outcomes. Really, and I would attribute that to PTSD.
Likely, your reactions aren't appropriate. I know in the beginning I would kind of skate by, you know, because I was in a type of environment where some things were more acceptable. But the last few years it just kept getting worse, and it got to the point where people would be like, why did you do that? Like, that's totally uncalled for, makes no sense. And I'd be like, I don't know, I thought it made sense. I think you're thinking in a way that makes sense in Iraq or Afghanistan, but it doesn't make sense to think that way in Athens.
Well, the motorcycle thing is interesting. That seemed to take place after every war. People would get motorcycles, and got the danger and the sound of war, perhaps, that sort of stuff. I don't know.
I did say I thought I didn't have PTSD because I thought, you know, you'd have flashbacks like you were in the jungle creeping through the woods. And I thought I'd never had a flashback. And then I found out that flashbacks are even real. It's not that I thought I was somewhere else or something else was going on, but a good combination of circumstances. We were taking the foundation out from underneath the house to lift it up and put a new foundation in. It was an old Sears mail order craftsman house, and they really wanted to restore it. And I had to crawl under the porch where it was all dry and dusty with the jackhammer and pound at the foundation there. And our boss was driving a small piece of equipment that was diesel operated though, and it was on tracks into the basement and out at the time, and the diesel fumes were blowing right through the holes I was making. And then I found out flashbacks aren't like I thought I was in Iraq, but I felt like I was. I knew I wasn't, and that kind of made it worse. And I just come out and sit down, got something to drink, and my friends come by, everybody else is still working, he said, "Are you all right? You don't look good." And I'm like, "I'm all right, I'll be all right." But I was like, damn, that's real too. I thought that was, you know, a looking at it now, maybe talking to you, it seems really unreasonable to think that those kind of things were made up. But I really thought that at the time, like it's an excuse. And it's not. It's not. It's real.
In our whole society, I mean, as you say, it's the macho man thing. And boys are taught from the time they're little, you can't cry, you can't do this, you have to suck it up and keep going. And so that's part of,
Yeah, that was another part of the whole deal, I think. Somebody asked me, when's the last time you cried? And I said, well, it was since before I went to Iraq, and I was in my 30s at the time, and I didn't even know I didn't cry anymore. I cry now. I can cry pretty easy. In happiness and in sadness. But at the time, I thought that was normal. I don't know. I said it's the culture, and then you join certain branches of the military, and it's...
I want to say thank you. My husband here, Waylon Hawk, he did 2 tours of duty in Iraq, and it's nice to know that there are families like this.
I wanted to say as well, thank you for serving our country, and it's hard to imagine what it's cost you. I really appreciate you saying that you're content with who you are now and how you've turned out, and how you've gotten things under control. And then you mentioned too about when you were 18 and you were deciding, what you were going to do when you went into the military. Do you regret doing that? Do you wish that you could be 18 and have made a different decision? How does that work out in your...
No, I don't. I just really don't look back at it like that at all. It's just what happened is what happened, and where I'm at now is where I'm at. I try not to even really think about it. I suppose it is revealing that I somehow convinced our oldest son to be smarter than me and join the Air Force and get an education. And he took my advice, the advice I didn't take from Marines and infantry guys. I want to prove just how tough you don't think I can do it, I'm going to show you. I wanted to do it so badly that I had to walk out of the recruiting station in Columbus because I'd scored in the high 90s on my ASVAB, and they said that I was too smart to waste in the infantry. I said, if I can't join the infantry, I'm not going. And I was leaving, and the recruiter chased me down and said, all right, they're going to let you do it. It's stupid. I was like, but I don't know. I don't know. I do regret it, and I don't. I suppose we all wish we could have done things differently, but we can't, so.
I'd like to say as well, thank you for your service. What are some things that family, friends, people in the community can do for folks that come back from the military and the war that have PTSD? What are some things that may have possibly helped you or through you that lifeline?
That's a good one. That's a really good question. I think it's a fine line between being supportive and not overwhelming. Like when we got off the plane in Kansas, they walked us into a hangar because they just tell you where to go and you go. With all our equipment, they said put our equipment on trucks. And when we got in there was a lot of people's families and local citizens and stuff in there, and they played patriotic music, and it was horrible. It was one of the most horrible things I've ever been through, honestly. So that wasn't good. It might have helped though maybe if people had been a little more persistent about, like, really, there's something. Tried to find a way. That's a good question because I don't know. I'll probably be thinking about that for a while now. I don't know, because it's a mess because you can't let some things slide. I mean, I don't have hard feelings toward people over all the trouble I got into because I don't know what else they could have done with me. Like the last time I got into trouble, they knocked the door off the hinges, a steel door in a brick house with a battering ram, and I come running in there, and there was lasers all over the wall like a Mission Impossible movie and all over me, and I don't have any hard feelings about it because I don't know what else they could have done. I think they did the right thing. I think it could have went badly otherwise. That's a good question. So there's a fine line between overwhelming them and because I don't feel like I did anything special. I just got out of a small town and went and did something that seemed like a lot of fun and semi-patriotic, to tell you the truth. I was 18, I didn't even really understand what patriotism meant. I really did everything I did while I was over there for the guy beside me. That's the only reason you do it. You don't think about the flag, and it's just, if I don't do my part, he dies. If he doesn't do his part, I die, so we're all gonna do our part. And then, of course, then you don't remember what they look like or their names, so. I can remember some of them now, though. I don't think I want to anymore. I even had to unsubscribe on my news feed. I always got to check off VA stories and stuff, because I can read that stuff and just drive myself crazy. I broke when it come to the one with the experimental malaria drug that they made a mistake that may cause lesions on the brain stem that mimic the effects of PTSD, and I was like, that's it, not reading any more of them, I've had enough. See, that's the kind of thing, it seems shocking and horrible, but I know from being at the VA and I know from watching the news that that's probably the last time I'll ever see it mentioned. Last time. Although my doctor says I should try and get tested for it, and I keep giving him excuses why I haven't. I think probably because I really don't.
I wonder also, I've read about some of there was a lot of burning of trash, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And how some of those fumes could have
Yeah.
an impact on your...
There was the burning trash. There was the chemical alarms always going off, even though there was never like chemical attacks. There was the oil fires were so bad. I remember when it rained, everything was covered with a layer of tar and soot. The sand, the bushes, the tanks, everything. So, I mean, who knows? And that is a time I signed under duress, a confidentiality thing that I would never mention that it ever happened, but that's also a time when they give you experimental drugs for things like malaria, as if there are mosquitoes in Iraq. Maybe there are, I don't know, but I was the only guy that refused to take the shot. I've always been kind of a jerk, so I refused to take the shot, so they waited till it was all over, then they drug me back up there and gave me a direct order, made me take the shot, and made me sign the paper that said I wanted it, so. That's my little spiteful way of getting back at him for doing it. I tell everybody about it. But I don't know. I don't think they can pinpoint it. For my era, they just called it Gulf War syndrome because they don't know what's wrong with guys. But then they refuse to diagnose anybody with it. Newer veterans, they have other names for it, and they focus on if you were in a location where they burnt the trash or this or that. They assume you have some, things. But it's politics, and they pass benefits for. If you're in Vietnam, you get this benefit. If you're in the Gulf War, you get this benefit. If you were in the latest skirmish, you get this benefit. And it's all a tangled up bunch of. Sometimes they'll be telling you about what they're going to do for you, then realize you were served in the wrong years and be like, oh, we can't do that. I'm like, okay. Like some guys have a caregiver. Their wife or somebody has to keep track of their medication and stuff. And I thought that's a good idea because I can't keep track of anything, and I kind of like to refuse treatment. I was in the wrong war. I can't have a caregiver. I had to be in the latest skirmish to get a caregiver. So it's a complicated problem. We're going to have wars, and I don't know how else they can conduct it, except with 18-year-olds that fought like me. And they say that veterans are treated better now when they come back. I don't know if that's true or not. The public has always been very supportive. People like you, anywhere I go. But as far as getting treatment within the military, within the Army, I find it hard to believe that it's any better than it was, but maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe there's guys like me that stayed in and made it be different. It's possible. He would probably know more than me what it's like now.
I don't know. I don't know if it's any better. I mean, you still feel like a number.
Yeah. It's strange that the VA would be the one place that, they refuse, they don't even like to say the words PTSD. It's the strangest thing. There's secret memos out there, don't even tell them they might have it.
So when my husband first got home in 2010 from NAMI, they did some phone calls, survey stuff, are you thinking of X, Y, and Z, how do you feel, etc. Eventually they did a mandatory checkup at the VA, so he went. It was like World War III, because he didn't want to go. this is like the PG version, obviously. 7 years later, the same doctor. I mean, we've had a lot of success this last year or two with the private sector.
Yeah.
So we're talking $5,000 out of our pocket. I'm a school teacher. Like, our insurance doesn't cover mental health.
It's supposed to.
It's supposed to. We looked at treatment centers, they want $50,000. Last Thursday, I called the VA and they said that he's not under the right benefits. There are beds, but they're not under the right benefits. And so here we are. Here we are. Operation Iraqi Freedom, Charlie Company, 2 tours of duty, 2 weeks after graduating high school. And I told him what your mom told you. I'm a social studies teacher. I knew we were going to war. And I threatened to break up with him. And but we love him anyways.
And one place I had a lot of success with the VA was Chillicothe, their drug and alcohol rehabilitation program. About unbeatable. But then from there, they transferred me to the mental health program, and I ended up, it was about a 50-50 split. I kind of got kicked out, and I kind of just left. Because I became overly hostile, and I thought, you're not in jail or in the hospital today, so you must be doing pretty good. And I swore a lot, and I said, well, I've been to both, and then you won't treat me once I'm there. You abandon me. I said, I'm trying to tell you now before I go that I really don't trust myself. Things aren't going very well.
And then you're gonna have your setbacks, you're gonna have, then go forward a little bit.
Yeah.
Now and then, but to be here where you are.
In my experience, that Ohio is all about punishment. They want you, rightfully so, I guess, to pay for what you did, but that's about all they
Well,
really
there's
care
a
about.
huge movement, though,
Yeah.
that, to get away from that, because it doesn't work. The punishment is punishment, doesn't.
Well, so many people with PTSD end up in jail. We have this, what I call the geriatrics jail in Nelsonville, and it's old timers of Vietnam era, and a huge number of them are in there for capital murder or whatever, and they're Vietnam veterans. I mean, it's just their minds were
I should know a few of them.
Huh?
I said, I think I know a few of them.
You know some?
Yeah, I don't stay in contact with them, but yeah, I've spent some time with them before they got transferred there. You gotta get a certain age or a certain
Yeah.
low quality of health before they take you there. And a lot of guys go screaming and kicking. They don't wanna go to the rest home yet, but.
Well, we probably ought to break up because the library folks like to come in and clean up, and they want us out here by 8. But you were really great. It was pretty well behaved.
Okay, bud. Come on.